Hey church family, I'm Austin. I'm the production director here at Willowbrook, and today we're in Esther chapter 4. At the beginning of this chapter, we find Esther and Mordecai, who are cousins, in two very different places. We see Esther in the king's palace. Remember from a couple chapters back, she's just been appointed the queen. And we find Mordecai in the city, and it says he's weeping and wailing, just in total distress. So Esther obviously cares about her cousin. She sends out some of her servants from the palace to figure out what's going on with Mordecai and why he's in distress. And the message she gets back from Mordecai is that the king has issued a decree that all the Jewish people within this Persian empire are going to be executed on a day that's coming soon. And that's really bad news for Esther and Mordecai because they're Jewish and all their families are Jewish. And so Mordecai is urging Esther. He says, you have to go before the king and you have to ask him to reverse this decree and to not kill our people. And it seems like the queen could do that pretty easily, approach the king about that. But that's not the case, because here in verse 11, Esther replies to Mordecai and says, all the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their lives. But 30 days have passed since I was even called to go before the king. So Esther, her life is on the line here, approaching the king without being requested. She could easily be put to death and most likely will if she does what Mordecai's asking her to. But Mordecai assures her he needs her to do this for their people. But he says, if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows, maybe your royal position has come for such a time as this. So there's two interesting things I think we can pull out of that verse. Mordecai, he says, if you remain silent, relief and deliverance will still arise from another place. So Mordecai is smart enough to know that even if Esther doesn't come through, God will provide. His ultimate plan will prevail. It's not dependent on one person, right? But he says, but you and your father's family will perish. So this directly, their own fate, was tied to their obedience and their faithfulness in God. And the second thing I think is interesting is he says, for maybe your royal position is for such a time as this. And I think God gives us positions of influence and sometimes positions of power. And I always wonder, if I find myself in a position of influence, what am I supposed to do with that? And I think God gives us positions of influence for two main reasons. And I think that's to bring glory to God and to bring help to others. I mean, every situation you find yourself in, if you have any influence in a situation, I think your singular focus should be, how can I bring glory to God and how can I help others? So finally, Esther agrees. Even though this could cost her her life, she agrees to go before the king. In verse 16 it says, go, gather all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. So Esther, she agrees to do this. She agrees to put her life on the line to hopefully save her people. But her terms are fasting and prayer from her and her people and Mordecai and his. And so approach decisions. I think this teaches us to approach decisions with fasting and prayer, knowing God's will, knowing that we're doing the right thing. So we want to look at two things from this primarily. We want to look at when we're in a position of influence, how can we bring glory to God and help others? And second, let us approach our biggest decisions in life, and all decisions really, with prayer and fasting. Let's strive to know God's heart and to seek His will in our decision making. I hope you have a great day, church family, and we'll see you tomorrow.